Hello everybody, and welcome back to another fun and exciting episode of the Fandom Show. I'm quite excited today because we're actually talking about a really cool fad that most of you have probably never heard of, and that fad is milk caps. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's Pogs. I'm talking about Pogs. And if you still have no idea what I'm talking about, you're probably not a 90s kid, because in the mid-90s, Pogs were everywhere. So if you don't know what Pogs are, the closest approximation that I can think of in terms of modern products are fidget spinners. If you remember a few years ago, fidget spinners were like suddenly everywhere, and now they're still around, but they're really not that popular anymore. So not quite the way it happened with Pogs, but it at least kind of gives you a sense of how it was in the 90s. So where did Pogs come from and why did they die out? Well, let's jump in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pogs.
What many of us know as Pogs, which are little round cardboard discs that you build a stack of and use to play a game, and I'll get more into detail about the game itself in a little bit, but what we know as Pogs actually originated with a company in Hawaii who made a drink, and the drink was made with passion fruit, orange, and guava, which is P-O-G, or Pog. The little round discs were the original caps for the drink. When the company made some changes with the drink, they decided to keep the caps because kids used the caps for this game. So it was actually relatively popular in Hawaii, but it didn't get outside of Hawaii until the 1990s. So what happened in the 1990s that made the game absolutely take off? Well, a Hawaiian school teacher by the name of Blossom Galbiso introduced the game to her classroom in around 1990. She'd played the game as a child and thought it was a lot of fun. So she introduced it to her classroom and helped teach the kids math, and also as a way they could have fun in school. It wasn't quite as aggressive as some other playground games like dodgeball or sports like football or soccer. Well, as you may not be surprised, the game in fact took off. The kids really loved it, and before long, milk caps spread from Galbiso's classroom to the rest of the Hawaiian Islands and then slowly to the mainland, where it launched the Pog craze of the 1990s.
And here it is, the drink that started it all.
Pogs hit the height of their popularity between 1992 and 1995, but by the end of 1997, were pretty much all but forgotten. Interesting trivia fact, you may or may not know that I happen to be Canadian. Go Raptors. And the company that originally manufactured the trademarked Pogs that were on the Hawaiian juice bottles where this all started was in fact Canadian. How about that? So, how do you play Pogs? Well, it's pretty simple. In Pogs, there's two different sets of game pieces. You've got your round cardboard discs, which are your milk caps, and then you've got a heavier piece, which is called a slammer. Okay, this is a silver dollar coin. It's similar in size and weight to a slammer, although the slammers tended to be a little thicker. So what you would do is, two or more players would take a bunch of their caps and put it in a pool, essentially a pot, like a pot of poker chips. And you would put them all up in a stack, and players would take turns. And what they would do is they would take the heavy piece, which is known as the slammer, and they would slam it down against the stack. Now, when the stack was put down, it was face down. So when you slammed this against the stack, some of the milk caps would turn face up. And the rule of the game was that the milk caps that turn face up are the ones you get to keep. So if I take my little slammer dealie here and I slam it down on the pile, and a really cool Iron Man Pog shows up face up, guess what? I get to keep that. Now, of course, you could decide before you played the game whether or not you were playing for keeps, which meant, do the other kids get to actually take the Pogs that they win from you, or does everybody get them back at the end of play?
Except no substitutes. This was an officially licensed Pog game.
Any 90s kid will tell you that Pogs were all over the place in the early half of the decade. I actually owned a set myself. Surprise, surprise. I think I sold it in a garage sale a few years ago, but I did have some. So, what killed the fad, and why did Pogs kind of disappear off the map? Well, there were a couple of factors. Number one, there was a lot of knockoffs on the market. I'm sure everybody remembers Slammer Whammers.
Knockoffs or not, they were still pretty cool, like this Double Dragon set.
And in fact, even Marvel Comics had their own version called Hero Caps.
I'm sorry, these still look really cool.
The caps themselves are very simple and cheap to manufacture, which is why many companies decided to try their luck at getting in on the craze. Another thing that killed Pogs is that some of the games that happened in playgrounds got very aggressive, especially if kids were playing for keeps. I'm sure if you were a 90s kid, you probably remember a few fights that happened over Pogs. Well, it just so happened that some school districts also consider Pogs a form of gambling because, again, players get to keep the Pogs that they flip over when they play the game. And so because of that, a lot of school districts banned the game. And so with Pog taken out of its natural environment on the playgrounds, there really wasn't as much impetus to play it as there was before. Not to mention most kids at that point had kind of a been there, done that attitude about Pogs and just weren't interested in anymore.
At the height of the Pog craze, there was even a World Pog Federation. Wow.
But just like so many comic book characters who have come back from the dead, there actually was a Pogs revival in 2005. The original company, the Hawaiian company who manufactured them, decided to see if they could get it going again. And amazingly, Slammer Whammers brought their product back on the market too. Their logic was that, hey, if it took off again, we'd already be right there and ready to make some more cash. Unfortunately, in a world of PlayStations, Xboxes, and smartphones, Pogs just weren't interesting anymore, and the new fad didn't take off. So Pogs for the most part are just one of those long gone nostalgic things from the 1990s. But I'm going to tell you something. If I had a stack of Pogs right in front of me right now, I would take this thing and slam it into them for old time's sake, because there is a part of me that actually kind of misses the game. That's all for this episode of the Fandom Show. Thanks for watching.